Welcome to Chasing Aesthetics, where fitness meets science.
I would like to talk a little bit about periodization types because we know that there's undulation, like daily undulation periodization. There's more types of periodization, and there's not necessarily one that fits the best for everyone. But what would you say that would be the most optimal for hypertrophy?
Yeah. So I think that for periodization, it's probably more important for a athlete playing a sport, or so like playing soccer or football or something like that, or for a strength athlete. And it's probably less important for someone that is mainly focused on like physique, bodybuilding, and that sort of thing. However, I do think that some sort of plan in your training is probably a good idea. And periodization is basically just planning these training variables that I just mentioned, your volume, frequency, intensity, in a way that might lead to a little bit better progress. So it's just planning these variables out. And I think for bodybuilding purposes, it makes sense to plan your training in a way to where you're at least having something in there to better kind of manage fatigue. So the way that you might do this is by incorporating deloads, maybe incorporating some lower volume phases every once in a while, maybe not training to failure right away in a mesocycle. Kind of doing those things is going to help you manage fatigue. And then along the same lines of periodization, we probably want to have some form of kind of progressive overload built into our planned out training. So what this might look like for bodybuilding purposes, I think that it makes a little bit more sense to progressively overload via the variable that tends to correlate most with muscle growth, which is volume. So I tend to like to progressively kind of ramp volume up a little bit throughout a mesocycle, kind of staying within your volume landmarks, which we can definitely talk about later. And then once you kind of get to that high end range of where you're like, I don't know if I can really recover from much more than this, then we might hit a deload, manage that fatigue, and kind of repeat the process. And then over time, we're still trying to get stronger from mesocycle to mesocycle as another form of progressive overload. And then additionally, kind of built into that single mesocycle, I like working a little bit closer and closer to failure as we go throughout a mesocycle. So the first couple weeks, we might be in that 2 to 4 reps in reserve range. And then those final couple weeks, we might be closer to that 0 to 2 reps in reserve range. And then that's a form of progressive overload as well, because we're training closer to failure. So we're probably using a little bit more weight as we're going throughout that training cycle. So all of these things are kind of building in that progressive overload, and we still have fatigue management of those deloads and working closer to failure. So we're not kind of working too much to failure too soon and kind of depleting our recovery resources and stuff like that. And then we also want our training to be nice and specific for physique and bodybuilding. So specific training for physique and bodybuilding is probably going to be relatively higher volume levels, working in that 6 to 12 rep range on average and doing that sort of thing. And I think that if you have those principles of fatigue management, progressive overload, and your training is specific to your goals, then outside of that, I don't think that you necessarily need to worry too much about whether your periodization is daily undulating, weekly undulating, linear periodization, and that sort of thing, you know?
Yeah, you can make your own type of periodization as long as it includes those principles of the training. So that's basically it. So now...
Don't forget to rate the podcast on iTunes and leave a review. May the aesthetics be with you.